The cannabis community includes a diverse set of activists and nonprofits working to end the prohibition of marijuana. We take the time to hear the stories of reform on the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Community Chat.
Welcome back, everybody. 32 after the hour, and I'm pleased to have on the show today the author of this great new book, Drugs, Crime, and Violence, From Trafficking to Treatment. It's Howard Rahtz, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is that correct, Howard?
That's correct. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. And I understand your background is retired Cincinnati Police Department, and now you've got this book out, Drugs, Crime, and Violence. And can you give our listeners just a quick overview of what they can learn from getting this book?
Well, first, it might be good for people to know that I'm kind of unique, maybe in the country. I'm one of the few people who's worked on both sides of the drug equation. I spent 18 years working in the addictions field, and then at age 42, I became a Cincinnati police officer and spent 18 years with the Cincinnati Police Department. So I'm one of the few people who's been kind of on both sides of this thing.
That's really good to hear, because I think one of the things we miss out in these policy discussions is understanding the exact nature of drugs, drug use, and what exactly our goal should be. Is it to reduce all drug use or to reduce drug harms? And you go into that a little bit in the book, and through your experiences of working with people with serious addictions, how do you feel that impacts the policies that we're trying to implement here with respect to drugs?
Well, one of the very major points I'm trying to make in the book is to provide treatment to people that are addicted to drugs. My interest in this whole thing, or my major concern, is the violence that's associated with the illegal drug market. And whether we're talking about violence on the Mexican border, which to say it's out of control is probably understating it, or the violence in cities like Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Chicago, New York. Every city in this country is afflicted by drug-related violence. So my purpose in writing the book is to try to present some way that we can suppress that violence. And the number one step, in my opinion, is legalization of marijuana.
So when you look at marijuana in the drug policy equations, do you separate it out as an outlier, something completely different than dealing with meth, coke, or heroin, for example?
I do. I mean, the RAND Corporation did a study and said that 90% of what we refer to as the various drug problems are caused by heroin, cocaine, crack, and methamphetamine. Marijuana is the most frequently used illegal drug, but it's the one that causes us the fewest problems.
There are people on the other side of us, from at least my position of legalizing marijuana, known as Project Sam, who just say that, trying to take marijuana out of the cartels isn't going to really hurt them that much. They'll just go and sell other drugs. How does your experience inform your opinion on that? I mean, it seems to me that you just can't manufacture hard drug addicts.
Well, I think that's absolutely wrong. First off, the marijuana is the cartel's cash cow. It's their number one revenue producer. It's estimated that 60% of the revenue that supports these killers comes from sales of marijuana. So when we take marijuana and move it out of the illegal drug market into a regulated, controlled marketplace, we've in one fell swoop taken 60% of the revenue from these guys. You're familiar with business operations, and most of us think about how could many businesses survive losing 60% of their revenue. It'd be very difficult for them.
But these opponents will come back and say that it really wouldn't eliminate them because they could still keep growing and try to undercut whatever taxed scheme we might set up in a legal society, and that also it's going to be a while before all 50 states legalize. So how do we address that when they bring that up?
Here's my answer to that. And people, I've heard that argument that they'll continue to sell marijuana even when it's legal because maybe they can produce it cheaper. And as you listen to that argument, ask yourself, when's the last time you knew somebody who drank bathtub gin? People will not, if they've got a legal product that they can buy down the street that they have some confidence in, that has some quality control measures. That's what they're going to choose to do. They're going to use the legal product. And you're right about the 50 states. The interesting thing about the end of marijuana prohibition is that it's going to look like the end of alcohol prohibition when the federal government gets its big nose out of this business. And the 10th Amendment to the Constitution says all those things not specifically enumerated fall back to the people, the states. So every state will have to come up with some regulatory mechanism. The people in that state are going to have to make a decision about how they want to handle marijuana. And I just point out that alcohol is still illegal in a significant percentage of the country. And I would expect the same kind of pattern to follow with marijuana.
We're speaking with Howard Rahtz. He's the author of this book, Drugs, Crime, and Violence, From Trafficking to Treatment. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the treatment side as well. I get frustrated a little bit by the reliance on drug courts to deal with marijuana so-called crimes. And my fear is that we end up putting a lot of people in rehab beds for marijuana who don't need it, and someone who needs it for meth or alcohol or something really devastating doesn't get that bed. Is that something you've found in your experience?
Absolutely. And treatment beds are an extremely valuable resource, and we shouldn't be utilizing them for anybody other than drug addicts. And, my experience with marijuana users, I know there's some people that become addicted to marijuana, but there's not many of them around. I haven't run into a whole lot of them. I think drug courts are just, the concept's great and they do some things, but I wouldn't be utilizing the resources of a drug court dealing with marijuana. And once we legalize marijuana, that's going to remove a lot of these people from the system anyway.
I'm really thankful that you've got a chapter in here, learning from the past. And I think that's one of the things that could inform our drug policy a lot better is if we took a look at some of our past mistakes, namely the prohibition of alcohol that we went through. However, a lot of times our opponents will say, well, alcohol prohibition was different. Alcohol has a long culture. Alcohol was used in all the countries around the world, and we were just the only one trying to ban it. So do you think there can be a fair analogy made between alcohol prohibition and marijuana prohibition, given that they were slightly or significantly different?
I don't think you can find a better analogy than the end of alcohol prohibition. One historian who I quote in the book, writing at the end of alcohol prohibition, said that when the federal government imposed alcohol prohibition, it took a giant slice of the economy and put it into the illegal business, taking that revenue from the hands of farmers, truck drivers, distributors, breweries, wineries, restaurants and bars, and move those billions of dollars into the hands of thugs and murderers like Al Capone. And when they reversed prohibition, the exact opposite happened. So here we are. We've now got a big economic pie that's in the hands of the cartels, thugs and murderers, just as he described them, related to alcohol prohibition. What we need to do is reverse that process, take them back out of the hands of the illegal market and put it into the legal regulated market.
You also write about the addiction to seriously addicting drugs like methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, alcohol, nicotine even. But you write of the market forces behind that addiction. And when I was reading that, I thought a lot about how our opponents fear. They make the analogy of big tobacco, that we'd have a big marijuana. So do you fear those kind of market forces with marijuana? Do you fear big marijuana corporations, if you will, trying to have more marijuana smokers, trying to peddle it to kids?
I don't particularly fear that. And as we move into this stuff, there's going to be problems that arise and alterations that are going to need to be made. But what we got to compare it to is what are we looking at now? Is it going to be an improvement over the system that we have now? And I'm really not that concerned about it. 40% of Americans have used marijuana, and I know there's the belief that if we legalize marijuana, there's going to be a whole millions of people who are going to rush out there and try to get it who've been constrained by the legal system. I just don't believe that. I think what we'd see is a small blip in marijuana usage and kind of back down to some kind of norm. I just don't see a huge new problem as they describe it.
Howard Rahtz is the author of this new book, Drugs, Crime, and Violence, From Trafficking to Treatment. You can pick it up on Amazon. You can pick it up on barnesandnoble.com, I saw. And Howard, you've got your own domain. Is that right? Can you give people, some contact information if they'd like to get in touch with you? Yeah,
I've got a website, and it's Howard, HOWARD, RAHTZ, one word, .com. And I'm blogging on that site, and there's also information about the book. And where it can be purchased. So I'd love to have more people visit the website.
Yes, howardratz.com. We've got that in our chat room, and we've already got some folks in Georgia and from Ohio in our chat room that are very interested in the topic. And are you also aligned with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition?
I am. I'm an active member of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And, as you think about all the various groups that are discussing, arguing about drug policy, I feel like LEAP is the most credible group out there. We are people who, have been in the trenches of the drug war, and most of us saying enough's enough and it's time to move on.
Yeah, it's definitely powerful voices. I got to work with Diane Goldstein out in Atlanta this last weekend, another great LEAP speaker. And every time one of you ends up on the evening news, I can just hear the sound of minds changing all across that city and state. Thank you, Howard, for writing this book, Drugs, Crime, and Violence, From Trafficking to Treatment. Lots of great info for reformers to learn from this. Check it out at howardratz.com. And Howard, thanks for joining us here on the Russ Belville Show. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, when we come back, we're going to take a little bit more of a look at that Southern Cannabis Reform Conference that we've been talking about all throughout the show today. We've got the lovely Georgia mom for marijuana herself in her chat room, Sharon Ravert, on the TV news in Atlanta, LEAP's Diane Goldstein, and a guy who used to have a mustache. Stay tuned. We'll show you that right after this.